verdicts in what had been billed as a trial for the history books nearly 6 years after the January 2015 attacks that targeted the cartoonists of Charlie Hebdo, a municipal police officer, and a Paris kosher supermarket. A range of guilty verdicts, the stiffest sentences going to the three tried in absentia, including the wife of hyper cacher killer Amédi Koulibaly, Hayat Boumediene, guilty of financing terrorism and belonging to a criminal network. Let's cross live to Paris Central Court's France 24's Sharon Gaffney is with us. Sharon, what's the latest?
Well, Francois, verdicts have been delivered. Sentences were handed down within the past 30 minutes. As you say, a variety of sentences delivered by the judge between 4 years and right up to life in prison for one of the accused. Now, that man is actually being charged in absentia. It's not known whether he's alive or dead. He is presumed to have died in fighting in Syria, but he has been sentenced here in Paris because the French authorities, they say they have no proof as to whether he's alive or dead. That's the stiffest sentence that was handed down. As you say, two others have been given sentences of 30 years. That includes the man who's described as the main suspect. It's 35-year-old Ali Reza Polat. He was described throughout this 55-day trial as the right-hand man for the gunmen. He was seen as being the main link between the attack at the Charlie Hebdo offices and the later assault on the kosher supermarket where 4 people were killed. And not forgetting, of course, the police officer that was targeted by the gunman who attacked the supermarket the previous day. So a range of sentences handed down. The accused, when these sentences were delivered in the court, they held their heads high. They looked surprised, but they didn't say anything. We spoke to one of the lawyers, France 24, spoke to the lawyer for the main suspect, Reza Ali Polat. She said that no matter what happened today, that no matter what sentence was handed down, what verdict was given, that really what her client had to say throughout this case hadn't been given any credibility, that he had been presumed guilty, she said, right from the beginning. We've also had some reaction from the families of some of those who were killed, including the first victim at the kosher supermarket east of Paris. His father said, yes, justice has been delivered to some degree. 2 or 3 people here received significant sentences, but he said that's not enough. So he feels in some ways justice was done in terms of the sentences handed down to some of those who were convicted, but not to all.
Not to all, Sharon, and there's that feeling of whether or not there's closure for everyone inside the courtroom. It's been a gut-wrenching 3.5 months.
It has. We had, of course, during the trial, there was very moving testimony and dignified testimony from some of the survivors of the attacks and also from the families of some of those who died. Now, not everybody felt strong enough to give evidence at this trial, but for those who did, they thought it was important. These proceedings is the first terrorism trial to be filmed in France under legislation that was introduced back in the 1980s. So what happened here during these last 3 months, it's going to be sent to the French National Archives. So for the survivors, for the victims who did give evidence, they felt that it was important to let the world know what they had been through. So we heard from, for example, the now chief editor of the Charlie Hebdo magazine, who told the court about having to step over the bodies of his fallen colleagues, his friends, as he left the Charlie Hebdo offices. And he spoke also about being torn between the necessity, as he felt it, of continuing to publish the magazine, but torn between that and his own grief and despair at having lost his friends and his former colleagues. We also heard from another man who worked at the magazine. He gave evidence on crutches, and he said that, well, he felt lucky that he'd only been partially paralysed after being shot and injured by the gunmen. We also, of course, heard very moving testimony from some of the people who survived the supermarket attack, including a cashier who, she said, escaped with her life when one of the bullets fired towards her till. It missed her by just millimetres. She said that the gunman turned to her after that and said, you represent the 2 things that I hate most in the world, French people and Jewish people. So for the people who survived the attacks and also for their family members, they just felt it was very important to put their experiences across. One of the victims, actually, the father of the 4th man who died at the supermarket, he was just 21 years old. His father is he's rabbi of Tunis, and he said it was important for him to show the world how proud he was of his son. who died at just, as I say, 21 years old. And he had died trying to overcome the terrorists who entered that supermarket, killing 4 people and taking several others hostage.
Yeah, France still scarred by what happened 6 years ago. And you could say even scarred by what's happened more broadly throughout the country the last 3.5 months. We'll be talking about it in the next hour in the France 24 debate. Sharon Gaffney, many thanks for joining us live there from Paris Central Court.